Hi everybody. Okay, today I want to talk to you about Emmanuel Haro and the various bits of information that have come out just prior to and then since the presser, which happened yesterday. And I apologise I've not covered them as they've happened, but I had a little mishap and I've been resting. So let's have a look at what's gone on. And I think the first thing for us to do is to have a look at the shocking scenes we saw that led to lots of interesting titles. So let me see this one first. So a couple of days ago, we saw this, which is Jake.
This video, it's from just a couple of hours ago. This is near Gilman Springs Road out there, and you can see Jake Haro there in the orange prison jumpsuit. Cadaver dogs, though, also out there assisting in the search for Emmanuel. But deputies say he was not located there. Now, Jake Haro and the baby's mother, Rebecca Haro, were arrested at their Cabazon home Friday morning on suspicion of murder.
Annie's arrests came for a week after the Haros reported the baby missing after Rebecca claimed that she was attacked while changing Emmanuel's diaper outside a Big Five store in Yucaipa. Deputies say the baby is presumed dead, and they're now working to recover his remains. The Haros are expected to make their first court appearances on Tuesday.
And now...
Okay, so that was the first thing that I saw. Apologies, let me get rid of that. That was the first thing we saw. We saw these images of Jake apparently helping to search for Emmanuel's remains. And that led to lots of press releases saying, number one, Jake has confessed, and number two, baby Emmanuel has been found. Neither of which at that point were even vaguely accurate. So, there could be many reasons how and why Jake was allowed to go out and help them to search and pointed them to a particular place. So he could have made some level of confession, either to being involved in what happened to Emmanuel, or simply in relation to what they did with him afterwards. So it could be that he is doing what he did on the last occasion, which is pointing the finger at Rebecca and saying, but I know where he is because she convinced me to help her to hide him, or I know where she's likely to have hidden him because I know where's special to her, or something like that, or because of something that she said. So there are a few different reasons why that could have occurred. Regardless, they found nothing. And there was only a few people visible on that footage, but actually there were reams and reams of people there. They were doing a toe-to-toe search of that whole area, and they had cadaver dogs with them. So one would assume that even if, for example, worst case scenario, Emmanuel's remains had been predated upon by wildlife, which is an awful thing to think about, but this is how nature works. There would still have been some trace of it, and there would still have been a hit by the dogs. Now, the other option, of course, aside from the things that we've already mentioned, is he could be playing games with the police, which there are certain offenders who revel in the thrill of the chase, the cat and mouse games that they can play with law enforcement. So that's not beyond the pale either. That's something that they may have done. He may have done. On the same day, and actually I've not pulled that up, so let me see if I can find it. Rebecca spoke from behind bars. Let me see if I can just find that very quickly. Oh, not really very helpful. Sorry, guys. Right. Oh, what's happened to my screen? Oh. Sorry about that, everyone. Right. Okay. So we then have the same day, Rebecca Haro purportedly sticking to her side of the story. So credit here goes to Fox Local. Let's see what she says.
Baby was kidnapped, saying, quote, "I want to be out looking for my baby." She also spoke about her husband saying, quote, "He's a good dad. He would never hurt a baby." That jailhouse interview happened Sunday, the same day Jake Haro, seen here in an orange jumpsuit, was brought by San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies to help look for Emmanuel's body near the 60 freeway in Moreno Valley. The body was not found, but detectives do believe the baby is dead. Sunday night,
Right, so that's not actually as helpful.
growing memorial out
because there is a place where it is. So the next thing that we got was on the same day, Sunday, Rebecca Haro made a statement from jail. She's sticking to her original story that she put out to the press when she claimed that Emmanuel had been kidnapped. So this is what she said. This is being read verbatim. And credit goes to KNBC for this.
I will not give up. I will not give up on my baby. I want to be out looking for my baby. The case of Emmanuel's disappearance has gripped the nation.
She also went on to say, and I apologise, I was just checking to see if it had the second part of that. She also went on to say, guys, and these words coming out of my mouth actually hurt to say, Jake is a good dad. Does this woman not understand his history? And why would she maintain that story which has been literally torn apart by law enforcement? There are a couple of options. I don't think she's represented at this point on Sunday, so it could just be, I'm sticking to my story. This was the script we agreed. We'll always stick together. And she's just been the ride or die that many have suggested she may be. Or she's so terrified of Jake. If he was treated badly, let's say, by him, she's so terrified of him that even from her position behind bars, she's not prepared to say exactly what happened. But that's where they currently stood on Sunday. We knew that Jake must have been cooperating in some format, but we didn't know how. And we knew that Rebecca was sticking to her story. Now, the next thing that we got was a report on News Nation by Brian Entin of a confession by Jake Haro to police directly. Now, he doesn't disclose his sources, but he is usually reasonably accurate. And this isn't some kind of weekend YouTuber who does it as a hobby. This is an actual journalist. Not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with YouTubers who do it as a hobby, because I'm one of them. But you'll understand why I'm making that distinction when we look at the press conference. So this is the next thing that happened. Do not take this as fact. Don't stop watching until the end when we look at where all this may have come from, okay? So do not just stop halfway through this video and then go off and report that Jake Haro confessed. Helps if I add it to the stage, of course. Bear with me.
Haro, baby Emmanuel's father, told police that he accidentally rolled over in bed. This is what sources are telling me, and accidentally killed baby Emmanuel, and then buried baby Emmanuel in a place so that he could go there to grieve him, which obviously made no sense. But when you think back to the weekend, Ashley, when police were out searching with Jake Haro in the jumpsuit, they had him out there. Very unusual to see that right along the freeway there in that area. It lines up with the story from my sources that he had indicated, and he's had a couple of stories, which I'll get into, but with this story that he had indicated to police that he buried baby Emmanuel after accidentally killing him.
Okay. So Brian's sources tell him that the reason that they were out searching with Jake Haro is because he'd given a story I'm not going to call it a confession because it's clearly utter rubbish, that he'd rolled over in bed and accidentally killed Emmanuel. Now, what I will say is that co-sleeping with very small infants, so newborn, very, very tiny infants who have no ability to move their body around, can result in accidental death if you roll onto them. That is why the advice from health professionals is that co-sleeping with very young babies is not advisable because it's risky. But Emmanuel was 7 months old. So in reality, it's highly unlikely that that would have occurred, save for one potential possibility. The only way that I can perceive that that is a possibility where a baby is born completely healthy, but by 7 months old, can't move sufficiently to get out of the way of an adult rolling over, is if my previous speculation about what may have occurred to Emmanuel is accurate. In other words, that he has been injured over a course of time by some very poor behaviour towards him. And as a result, he's got some level of neurological deficits. For example, some level of paralysis, potential blindness or deafness or whatever it may be. So he can't move. Because the reality is most babies, when they're that old, if you rolled over and lay on them, they just move their head to the, that really hurt, move their head to the side so that they can breathe. I hurt myself. If anybody rolls on me, I'm going to have a problem moving my head out of the way. But survival instincts would take over, and no matter whether it hurts to turn my head, I would still do it. So that's one potential. But I think the reality is the fact that there was no indication of Emmanuel in the place that Haro led them to leads me to believe that was a story that was utter rubbish if it ever came out of his mouth. And it might have, but it may not have. And I say that because in the press conference, they were clear that a confession has not happened. And he was very adamant, in fact, the DA. He said, I've already told you that never happened. It simply didn't happen. So, it could be that they don't want to discuss in detail what's happening because they talk about a level of cooperation with the suspects. So they may not want to talk about what's happening with that cooperation, but are happy to say there was no confession because they have ruled out the story as being an actual accurate confession. Could they answer that question in that way without lying or misleading people? Potentially. Why would they do that though? I'm not sure that it makes sense because really what they would do if it would harm the investigation to tell us about it would be to say, I can't answer any questions about that. It's a live ongoing investigation. But to categorically say it did not happen, that's confusing. And it gets even more confusing, let me tell you. I've held off really in doing anything about this because it's had me bamboozled because there's been so many contradicting pieces of information. But my view is I'll lay it all out there. You can make your own decisions about what you believe did or didn't happen. So that is the story of Jake's initial confession. Then Okay, the next thing that happened was this. So again, this is from Brian Entin. I'm going to play quite a big portion of this, and there's a reason for that. So I'll play Brian's initial introduction into what's been discussed, but then he has a guest on, which lends some significant credibility to what he's saying.
About the baby Emmanuel murder case out of California. Baby Emmanuel's father, sources tell me, Jake Haro, told a fake inmate in the jail that he killed baby Emmanuel and put the baby in a trash can in his house. Let me repeat that again. Sources say that Jake Haro told a fake inmate in the jail that he killed baby Emmanuel and put the baby in a trash can in his house.
Right, so just before we carry on with this, let's tie this back to something that we know happened during the investigation. The police were making a significant search of a trash can at the end of the street near their home. So that ties in a little bit. But let's carry on.
You might be wondering how police got this information. This is part of what I'm told is called a Perkins operation. A Perkins operation, which is when police use a fake inmate to try to get information out of someone who has been arrested and who is inside the jail. This Perkins operation came after, I'm told, Jake Haro confessed to police that he rolled over in bed and killed the baby by accident and then buried the baby. So that is what Jake Haro told police, which is why he took police to that spot out along the freeway. This video that we have that shows him out there searching. That story, I'm told police believe, was all made up. First, they got that story. Then they decided to do the Perkins operation, I'm told, which is when they used the fake inmate and when they say they got the information that Jake Haro actually killed baby Emmanuel and put baby Emmanuel into a trash can. Meanwhile, baby Emmanuel's mother, I'm told, is still sticking to the same story. They also did a Perkins operation with her in jail, and she is standing by her story that baby Emmanuel was kidnapped. That is also, you'll remember, what she told a reporter who she talked to in jail. So
Sorry, Brian, for where I've paused you there. So, what is alleged to have happened in a Perkins operation with Mum matches what she has said to reporters. Now, that could be that someone's made up the story about the Perkins operation and used what she said to reporters, or it could be that they corroborate each other, setting out what Mother's current position is. And then what Dad is alleged to have said is that he killed the baby and put him in the trash at the home. Now, there are a few things that cause me some concern with this. The first one is most people know how inmates treat other inmates who hurt children. So why would Jake Haro tell an inmate, fake or real, that he had killed baby Emmanuel? I can foresee some occasions when that might occur. So if you've ever heard the phrase birds of a feather stick together, if the fake inmate talks about what they did and it is of a similar ilk, then he may have been lulled into a false sense of security and been prepared to say what he had done. So that could have happened. What is a Perkins operation? Well, they'll go into that in a bit more detail, but suffice to say that it is legal. So even though the person isn't read their Miranda rights, as long as they do not know that the person they're speaking to is an officer, then the Supreme Court has said that that is fine. It's admissible what they say during one of these operations. And the reason it's called a Perkins operation is because the original case where this was discussed by the courts, and it went all the way up through the different court levels, was called Perkins. That was the name of the defendant. So let's carry on listening.
So many tragic twists and turns in this case. My big concern right now is that if this story is true, that police allegedly found out about through this Perkins operation, that he killed baby Emmanuel and put him into a trash can, and that it may have been up to 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, will they ever actually find baby Emmanuel?
Up to 3 weeks ago doesn't match the indictment. So the charges that have been laid are that between it's either the 3rd or the 5th. Bear with me. I've completely forgotten. Is my phone come back on? That's it. It was between the 3rd or the 5th, I can't remember which, of August and the 14th of August is when the red rum occurred. So 3 weeks doesn't match. If he had made this Perkins operation confession, they'd have included that 3-week period, because the last thing they would want to do is include too short of a period and then discover that the actual act happened outside of the period that they've charged. So that leads me to lean towards the fact that the DA is correct and this didn't happen. But Brian's guest is a former prosecutor in the Riverside County area who says that she has inside sources. So we're going to hear from her next. Just hear a little bit from her, and then we'll talk about and have a little look at the press conference.
I'm joined now by Kim Dagonia, a former Riverside County prosecutor. Thank you for joining me again, Kim. I want to start with this new reporting that we have, that Jake confessed to police that he rolled over the baby, killed the baby, and then buried the baby. But apparently that story was not true, right?
Yes, that is correct. My inside sources are telling me that was absolutely a lie. He made that all up to the police in order to, I guess, garner some type of sympathy, garner some type of a linear charge or sentence, but he made up this entire fabricated story that he was asleep with the baby Emmanuel, that he rolled over onto baby Emmanuel. When he woke up, he realized the baby was dead and he panicked. And so he went out to the Gilman Springs area that we saw him with the police the other day, and he buried the body because he wanted to have the opportunity to go back and mourn his son's death and visit him. That was his.
Now, let's be clear, that original explanation, that would be something that you can imagine a defendant claiming, because it makes it an accident. It's not a willful act of unaliving. And so they would perceive there's a chance that they will be treated more leniently. But how this man thinks that he will get away with any such story, bearing in mind his past history, is beyond me. The police are going to make sure they have crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's before they get anywhere near a trial court.
His story. That's why he was out there in his chains and his shackles, allegedly trying to lead the police to the body that was never there.
Okay.
It was just part of his story.
The reason that we know that this is allegedly made up is because of this reporting that we have, that he spoke to someone who he thought was an inmate in the jail, but it was actually what is known as, is it a Perkins operation? So it's actually a police officer who he admitted to actually killing the baby. First of all, can you explain what a Perkins operation is?
Sure. We don't know if the person who was undercover was a police officer, if it's another, run-of-the-mill citizen of the community that was acting as an undercover inmate. We just know there was another body in the jail cell pretending to be an inmate in the same inmate clothes as Jake Haro, shackled in the same manner in which Jake Haro is. And they begin to ask questions while being recorded to Jake specifically about the charges and why he's in there, in hopes that he will admit whatever really happened to baby Emmanuel to these fake inmates in custody. And it's called a Perkins operation. These types of investigative tools have been going on for decades in agencies and district attorneys' offices across California. It's a very standard and typical investigative tool that you see the sheriff's department use in many different cities and counties across California.
Is it controversial at all doing that?
Yeah, it's been very controversial. I think Orange County District Attorney's Office was at the center of a lot of the controversy a few years ago. From that came a much tighter rein on how these are conducted. The Riverside District Attorney's Office, from my understanding and my experience, has gone to great lengths along with the Sheriff's Department to make sure that they are following and articulating the legal analysis and following the law as they conduct these operations. It's very specific, and in my experience, they follow the law in using this tool as an investigative means to get a confession out of many defendants over the years.
So this was a fake inmate who he told reportedly that he killed baby Emmanuel and then put baby Emmanuel into a trash can. I'm just thinking about waste management and all the trash cans and the landfill. I mean, it sounds like this could be very difficult in terms of finding his remains.
Yes, that's the sad part of all of this. That is correct. He did confess to these, we will call them fake inmates, that he did kill baby Emmanuel and that he threw him in the trash can at his home.
Okay, so did we hear what she just said? So this is the former prosecutor. He did say this to a fake inmate. She goes on to say that she has sources inside the Riverside County DA's office still.
Approximately a week before Rebecca Haro even stated that the baby was missing. So baby Emmanuel's been missing for quite some time.
So she's able to give us some more detail here. So it's approximately a week before the false report came in, which that ties in with this period of 3rd to the 14th.
And as a result, Waste Management, from my understanding, has told the Sheriff's Department it would be nearly impossible to determine which Waste Management truck took the trash, which bin it was in, and which landfill this particular trash can would have gone to, making it almost impossible that we will ever find baby Emmanuel's body.
Now, this bothers me. And I'm thinking back to a different case where they did find a baby's remains in a landfill. And we heard evidence during that trial from a member of the waste management company who said that every collection is logged. It has the driver's details, which truck it was, and where it was taken to. Not only that, but which part of the grid within the waste management site it could be found. Now, I understand the difficulties with the fact that they don't have a specific day or time or which trash can. And it may be that, so in England we have 4 different trash cans that we use for each house. So we have one for general waste, one for paper, one for glass and bottles, and one for garden waste. Now, you would have thought that you wouldn't put it in glass and bottles or paper. That would seem bizarre. It's more likely that you would put it in general waste or garden waste. But even if you had all 4 of those to search, if you knew which week it was in, then surely those records would be available, and it could narrow down the search within the waste management site to enable them to start conducting what would be an extremely big operation. But I tell you, in that other case, they spent weeks going through bit by bit, doing a fingertip search of that waste management site in the grid section that was described, and they would have like a section of the waste pushed forward. They would go through that would be pushed away. They'd have another section pushed forward, that would be pushed away. So it's not impossible, and I don't like the idea that law enforcement are being given the impression that it isn't possible, because it should be.
That's awful to think about.
It really is.
Terrible.
It really is.
So this Perkins operation with the fake inmate happened. Did that happen after, I'm assuming, the after he lied to lied and said that he buried the body?
Yes.
Okay. So that was really just a wild goose chase out there.
It was 100% a wild goose chase, from my understanding.
Wow, that's got to be frustrating for law enforcement.
Oh, for sure. And it goes to show you Jake Haro's mental status, right? The level that he will go to not only kill an infant, but the great lengths he will go to cover it up and create this fabricated lie. Such a fabricated lie that he allowed investigators to participate in something that's not ordinarily done, which is basically taking a field trip out to a fake crime scene. I mean, he created all of that in his mind, knowing it was a lie, knowing it was fake, and lived out the entire lie for the next 24 hours with law enforcement. That's pretty intense.
Yeah,
It just shows the level that you're dealing with.
I'm thinking back to his story. He said that he was mourning his son, so he buried him. Like, how does that make any sense?
Right. He claims that from what I understand, he buried the body close to his home so that he could go back and visit, almost like a gravesite, because he never planned on telling anybody the baby was dead.
But that was all made up.
Yes.
Okay. And then we've also reported that Rebecca Haro, that there was also a Perkins operation with her. So a fake female prisoner, and that she has been sticking to her original story, which is similar to what she said to the reporter for the newspaper who got through to her, that, you know, that there was this essentially this kidnapping and that they don't know what happened. It's kind of interesting that that she's sticking to the original story, and it sounds like he's, not.
Right. That's my understanding. She is sticking to this story that somebody stole her baby and she wants him to be brought home.
What do you make of that she's still sticking to the story?
I don't know. I was not there to watch the Perkins operation or to watch any of her interviews, but my best guess would be there's probably something mentally off with Rebecca Haro. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future months we see some type of mental health diversion paperwork being filed on her, domestic violence assertions that Jake inflicted upon her. I don't think we're done with hearing the backstory behind Rebecca. I don't. I think there's more to come.
Do you think she's trying to cover for him?
I'm not sure at this point if it's trying to cover for him or if it's a cycle of abuse where she's afraid. I don't know if there's maybe some cognitive lowered intelligence that she's, just repeating what she's been told. But like I said, again, I don't think we're done hearing the backstory to Rebecca. I think there's more there.
With these Perkins operations, since you have been a part of many before in your past, do they record them, or how do they work? Like, how do they go down? How do they find the people? I'm sort
Okay, I want to move on a little bit to this element, which I think is important. So a lot of people have asked, is it possible that what Jake did to promise Faith, his older daughter, could be used during a trial in relation to what has happened to Emmanuel Haro? And this answers that.
and back to the 1109, you talk about section 1109, and this was in the charging documents.
Oh, you don't want to listen to it at 2 speed, do you? Let me turn it back to normal.
As pursuant to section 1109 of the Evidence Code, evidence of the defendant's commission of other acts of domestic violence may be admissible at a trial in a criminal action in which the defendants are accused of an offense involving domestic violence. The people hereby give notice of the people's intent to admit evidence of prior acts of domestic violence pursuant to Evidence Code 1109. So you said it, but I just want to make sure I understand. So basically, are they saying we plan to bring in these other cases, like the case we've talked about of the other child who was badly hurt?
It sure seems that way. 1109, if you go on and read it further under section 3, it talks about prior abuse on dependent children. And so my guess is that's exactly what they're alluding to in this complaint.
So back to Jake Haro and his different stories that he has allegedly told. And then you've got Rebecca still standing by the fact that she says there was this kidnapping. Is it possible that he killed baby Emmanuel and she doesn't know?
Is it possible? I guess, but is it reasonable and likely? I don't think so. They were living together in the same home.
Now, I entirely agree with this. First of all, you can, in certain circumstances, both in the UK and America, bring in what is essentially evidence of similar acts being done previously, if they're so similar in nature that it's probative about whether the person did the current thing. So that's the 1109. And then in terms of whether Rebecca could not know, I really struggle to understand a world in which somebody is living in the home and that across a period of a week or more, they aren't aware that something has happened to their baby, despite the fact that their other half, A, the baby's not there, and B, their other half takes out of the house all of the photographs and clothes belonging to that child. It doesn't make sense. And so I think that would be highly unlikely. It would be a really difficult one for a defense attorney to spin.
You know, she presumably lived in the same house where she sees the photographs being taken down of baby Emmanuel, all the clothing being gone, the baby's not there. I mean, it begs the question, why didn't you call sooner? If you weren't part of the cover-up, if you weren't part of the murder, if you weren't part of aiding and abetting, why in the world as a mother did you not call the very first day Emmanuel was no longer in your home? It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
So no, I think that she had to have known something nefarious went down.
Yeah, that would make sense. Last time we spoke about how there was no body, and prosecuting a no body murder case can sometimes be tricky. Based on what we now know about this, I guess you could almost call it a jailhouse confession to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
How much more solid is the case now? And are those Perkins operations always admissible at trial?
Right, okay, I'm going to leave it there with this one because otherwise we're going to be here forever. So, a nobody case with an adult is very difficult because it's really hard to confirm and prove that the adult didn't just get up and walk away. This is a 7-month-old child. So that makes it a little bit easier. And I think from the way that they talk in the press conference, it's quite clear that they have got plenty of evidence to demonstrate that something nefarious happened to this young child. So let's have a very quick look at that.
Helping us with this investigation. Let me tell you how things are going to go today. There's going to be several individuals that make statements up here, and then when we're all done with this, with the short statements, I will come back up and we will have a question and answer. I will take questions. I will take all of your questions till there are no more questions. Having said that, there's a lot that we can't say, that I can't say, that nobody up here can say. And the reason is that the defendants in this case have been charged with crimes, serious crimes. And so now they have a presumption of innocence that applies to them. They're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. I'm not allowed to prove my case in the court of public opinion. And so there's a lot that we can't say in terms of the facts and the evidence. For that, you will have to come to the court and to the various hearings and see how the case plays out. However, having said that, it's appropriate to have a press conference because it was the defendants in this case that had a press conference first. And they did so in order to tell the public, the media, and ultimately law enforcement that their child had been kidnapped, when in fact that's not what occurred. And so we're here to clear up some misconceptions and to explain how this case unfolded in terms of the investigation. It involves two counties working very well together. I know everybody here on this stage, we work well together normally, but in this case, I'm very proud of the work that was done by Riverside County Sheriff, San Bernardino County Sheriff, my office, and also the District Attorney's Office in San Bernardino County. All right, so we'll go ahead and kick this off. I'm going to bring up first San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dykes.
Thank you, Mike. To Mike's point, I want to thank all of you in the media for covering this, specifically the parents' initial statements to the public while we were trying to find Emmanuel. They became critical as we continued through this investigation. But I want to talk about a little bit about the process because we've seen a number of.
Just before he gets into what he's going to say, what I am going to say is, if you are a YouTuber, be prepared to get irritated. Because despite the fact that where this information about things that have happened has come from is from News Nation, which is a proper press organisation, and from a former prosecutor in their area, Riverside County, they essentially blame all YouTubers for the fact that there's misinformation out there, which I think in these circumstances is somewhat harsh. And the reality is that the pressure on the judicial system created by such significant community awareness of cases like this mean that hopefully Jake Haro will not be given second chance again, so that he can get out on the streets and do this again to another child. But just be prepared to get a tiny little bit irritated.
Questions related to Amber Alerts and things like that. So I hope when I finish this that everybody understand kind of the course of the investigation. But the investigation started for us on August 14th when Rebecca Haro reported that her son had been kidnapped. Folks, within 24 hours through video surveillance, we found inconsistencies in Rebecca's statement And as a result of that, there was no other vehicle to put out on an Amber Alert or anything. And I know many of you were wondering why that didn't occur. But really, after finding out those inconsistencies in the statement on the initial report, that's where hundreds of hours of investigations have come in by our specialized investigations division to try to get to the bottom of what's really going on here. And when I say hundreds of hours, I'm talking about forensic data on vehicles, phones, and potential crime scenes, judicial authorized search warrants that were served. And through that process, that's where we learned that the jurisdiction of where this has occurred was in Riverside County. So hence the Riverside County DA and Riverside County Sheriff's Department, which I can't stress enough. We've had a long-term partnership. We work well together and we know how to get things done in these environments. But that's why the jurisdiction had changed from the original jurisdiction that was reported in, which is Yucaipa, California. But as we went through that portion of the investigation and realized that these things that had happened in Riverside County, you saw the culmination of all the different entities get involved. And going back to what Mike mentioned about the DA's office in San Bernardino County and high-tech crimes, forensically, there are a number of things that we were able to prove up that we're not going to be able to share today exactly how we did that, but there is a tremendous amount of evidence that suggests that the initial story posed was not the correct story. So in that partnership with our agencies, I'm going to introduce my partner, Chad Bianco, where this crossover occurred at Riverside, and we reached out to Mike, who's obviously filing the case, and of course, Chad, to assist us in the investigation. Chad?
Thank you. Like Sheriff Dicus, I just want to thank all.
So let's think about what he just said. So the San Bernardino County Sheriff has said in less clear terms, they know where the unaliving event or act occurred, and it was not in San Bernardino. It was in Riverside, i.e. were later told at the Cabazon home. So they know a fair amount, even if they don't have baby Emmanuel in their hands physically at this moment in time.
All of you for the normal mainstream media for your attention to this and for your cooperation in this as we were assisting San Bernardino in this investigation, trying to originally find a missing baby, but then eventually quickly learning that that investigation was not something that it started as. Not so much for social media and keyboard warriors who quite honestly sometimes hamper and prevent.
I told you were going to get cranky.
Us from a good investigation. I do want to expand a little bit about our relationship with San Bernardino. A lot from the media, a lot of questions have been raised about jurisdiction. And what Sheriff Dicus and I routinely talk about to our own communities isn't really necessarily displayed in the media or said to the media, but neither one of us care about jurisdiction. Our belief is that the Inland Empire is better served when we are cooperating and working together. And in this investigation from the very beginning, it was obvious that it could involve both counties. When something like that happens, particularly in this case, the original investigation began with Sheriff Dicus, and if he chooses to take it to the end, he will, which obviously he did. And my position is Sheriff Dicus is responsible for this and the assistance of my department. So there is no asking us, there is no anything like that. It is, we have to serve our public best, and he has every single available resource that the Riverside County Sheriff's Office has to offer to make sure that we provide justice in this case. This is an extensive investigation with both agencies that ultimately is headed by the supervisor of the Detective Bureau from the Sheriff's Office in San Bernardino. But the cooperation, as you can see, between the both counties is what is going to bring this to a successful conclusion. There is absolutely nothing, no crime more important than the injury of a human being, particularly a child. And the amount of resources that were expended to find this baby and to ultimately bring the people to justice responsible for the loss of this baby, I can't even tell you the amount of resources that were expended in this. It is a massive investigation that will.
I don't know if anybody caught that. So the formal position is that they have not yet found baby Haro's remains. But he just said the amount of resources that were expended to find baby Emmanuel. It could be just a slip of the tongue. Who knows? Just pointing that out.
Obviously be ongoing, and we appreciate your efforts. This involves a lot of things though from us, and hopefully there are more questions to be answered, but I'll end it by saying this before we get into more questions specifically about this case. This was preventable in numerous ways. The amount of response we have had from the public, the enormous anger that a child was not only originally thought to be kidnapped, but then presumably murdered, kind of warms my heart a little bit, that there is compassion still out there. There is care about other people. There is, people actually do care about other people. There is absolutely nothing worse than harming a baby. Broken bones, injuries, life-altering trauma. And had that case been successfully handled how it should have been, Emmanuel would still be with us today.
Preach it. I completely agree with what the sheriff is saying. And the DA goes on to deal with this in even more detail. But how somebody can cause the level of injury that was caused to Promise Faith, where a child is left with 3% of their brain function, that's going to be the status quo from the time they are 10 weeks of age all the way through until their death. It's almost worse than unaliving somebody. And it should be treated with the same level of seriousness. And this man should never, ever have been on the streets to do the same thing to Emmanuel.
So I thank you all for taking the time and the effort to make sure that the world sees this investigation, and we will successfully bring it to conclusion with the help of both DA's offices.
Thank you, Sheriff. I neglected to mention that Sergeant Nicholas Clark is the lead investigator on this case. So even though he's San Bernardino County, he will be functioning as the lead investigator on this case, which is ongoing. The investigation is ongoing, even though we have filed charges. And then Brandon Smith is going to be the lead prosecutor on the case, obviously Riverside County prosecutor. And with that, obviously, you all know, yesterday in court, we filed murder charges on both Jake and Rebecca Haro. We also filed filing of a false police report. And with that, I will take questions. I know you're going to have a lot of questions. I do want to lay some ground rules. The way we do it here is don't shout at me, no chaos, just raise your hand. I ask you to ask me one question at a time. I'll do my best to call on everybody. When we've gotten through everyone who has a question, then we can go back and ask more follow-ups, okay? So I'll start here on the front row. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Stephanie with CNN. My question is, first of all, do you have any idea where baby Emmanuel is at this point?
You know, yes, we have a pretty strong.
So I don't know if you heard that. What she asked was, Do you have any idea where baby Emmanuel is?
Indication of where the remains of baby Emmanuel are. So that investigation is ongoing at this time. Yes, go ahead.
Matt Johnson, Court TV. What was the information that led to the initial search off the 60 in Moreno Valley?
Okay, so that question was, what was the information that led to the search on Sunday off Highway 60? In Moreno
Sheriff, you want to
Valley?
take that?
I'm not going to go into grave detail about that, but there is some level of cooperation with the suspects involved in this, and we're trying to locate that, and our job is to follow every lead. But for the rest of the room here, we have to understand what you're dealing with is an experienced child abuser that is aware of a previous case, that is aware of evidentiary things that we are certainly concerned with. So we're going to take every step to not only work with any suspect or witness involved in this, because at the end of the day, we have to bring a case to Mike and they have to charge it. And we have to make sure that every single thing, no matter what is told to us or what we discover in terms of evidence, is the right thing and that we followed up extensively.
Okay, who's next?
So essentially, they're telling us nothing about how and why they ended up doing that search. A level of cooperation with the suspect. That's it.
I'll go to you first and then to you. Go ahead.
Gigi Gracia with Fox 11 News. Do you believe you know how baby Emmanuel died or was killed, and is there anything you can share?
I think she asked, do you believe you know how baby Emmanuel died? I'm not 100% certain. It is quite hard to hear.
The filing in this case reflects our belief that baby Emmanuel was abused, victim of child abuse over time, and that eventually, because of that abuse, he succumbed to those injuries.
So this correlates with what I said in my previous videos, which is that looking just at the images, and I don't have the evidence that the police and the DA's office have, but just looking at those images, which were taken over a period of time, it looks clear to me that he has been injured previously. And that would also correlate with what we know about when Promise Faith was in the care of Jake Haro, because whilst he sticks to his story currently, and he has given an interview from jail, which says that, you know, it was an accident and he dropped her on the partition between two sinks. That is not what the evidence demonstrated. It very clearly demonstrated that Promise Faith, and the DA is going to go over this in some great detail, suffered injuries which had occurred across a period of time. Now, she'd only been here for 10 weeks. So that's some pretty good going, really, to be able to carry out a course of conduct type of offence where the baby is only 10 weeks old. We know she had fractures to her ribs, 6 different ones, in fact, that were at different stages of healing. Not 2 stages of healing, so it was 2 incidents, different stages of healing. That lends credence to the fact that this wasn't 1 incident and it wasn't 2 incidences. It was a prolonged course of conduct. This, from all accounts, and this is my opinion and my opinion only, and he is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, my opinion is this is the type of gentleman who is not a gentleman. This is the type of man who can barely even be called that, who is prepared to treat his own children as an anger management outlet. And we see this on a regular basis with certain types of individuals They perceive that the other individuals in their lives, whether that's their partner or their children or their partner's children, are simply a punching bag, a tool to be used for whatever means they require, including, for example, doing the housework or whatever. But they are used as a tool. They are used as a punching bag. They are used as a way for the individual to vent their anger and to demonstrate their power and control over others. It doesn't say much about the level of your power over others and your control over others when that individual is 10 weeks old. Of course you have power over them. The key to having that level of power is to use it wisely and to treat that baby with care, compassion, and as the fragile being that they are, who relies upon you for everything that they need, not to take out your temper tantrums on them.
That's what we believe. Yes, sir.
Eddie with Action Eye News. I noticed on the arrest records and booking records that they do have Jake Haro as murder with malice and also another murder charge as well. Is there a second murderer, or can you explain why there's two?
Okay, so that question was, you appear to have charged murder with malice and another murder allegation.
We charged both Jake and Rebecca with murder.
So I think that's where the confusion may have come from. It's 2 charges, 1 for each defendant. They also charged each defendant with the false report of the kidnapping, and they put in the clause that they may rely on Jake's previous offences.
Who's next? Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
This is in reference to what Dad was talking about, but can you go into some detail about that case in 2023 and what happened there?
Sure.
And from my understanding, it's a suspended sentence.
Yes, I will. So in 2018, Jake Haro with his...
So this is literally, can you tell us about the previous incident that Jake was convicted of?
His ex-wife, there's another child who they were prosecuted for child abuse as well, child neglect, cruelty. That child was also an infant, and that came to the courts, arrested in 2018. It came in to the courts in 2023. We had charged various felony crimes, child abuse, child cruelty, and our indication or our what we wanted out of the case was prison. We believed it was a prison case and that Jake Haro should have gone to prison. Jake Haro pled straight up to the court, which sometimes reporters get this wrong and you call it a plea bargain. Judges are not allowed to plea bargain. Defendants can plea bargain with the prosecutor, but when a defendant pleads up to the court, they plead to everything that they've been charged with, and they're essentially throwing themselves on the mercy of the court. In this case, a judge here in Riverside County, happened to have been a visiting judge from San Bernardino County, gave Mr. Haro a suspended sentence, which means, if I can translate for you what that is, it means that instead of sending him to prison, he chose to give him probation and suspend prison time sort of over his head, meaning that if he violated his probation, he would then go to prison. My prosecutor in the courtroom objected to that and said on the record,
I completely understand where the DA is coming from here. It should have been a prison case. He did get a suspended sentence. He was also breached on his probation. Didn't go to prison at that point either. That case has been ongoing for over 12 months, and had that have been dealt with at the time properly and swiftly by the authorities, that includes the DA's office and the courts, then he wouldn't have been around to do any harm to Emmanuel.
We object. We think it's a prison case. You should send him to prison. And the judge decided, as is the judge's right to do in that case, he decided that Mr. Haro deserved an extra break and gave him probation and basically 180 days of work release, which ends up being like community service. I will say that it was an outrageous error in judgment by this judge. And I don't have any problem saying that. I'm not attacking the judge personally. That decision was absolutely outrageous. Mr. Haro should have been in prison at the time that this crime happened. And if that judge had done his job as he should have done, Emmanuel would be alive today.
Absolutely accurate. He should have been in prison. Should have been in prison from the first offence, and he should have been in prison from the breach of the probation requirements as well. So whichever way you look at it, everybody in authority in that area has let Emmanuel down.
And that's a shame, and it's an outrage. And I hate to say that, but when our criminal justice system breaks down, I'm going to just call it like it is and tell you it broke down. It's not how it's supposed to work. The judge had obviously meant well. At the end of their sentence, he told Jake, I'm giving you a big break today. Don't mess it up. But I want to point something out to you. I want to read to you the injuries. That the child's name is Carolina. She is still alive.
Just before he gets into the injuries, which is really important to listen to, because it demonstrates the level of depravity of Jake Haro. There is an offence that they could have charged at that time, not cruelty to children, not willful neglect or any of those things that they did charge. But there is a charge, and I can't remember the penal code, that is causing injury to a child who ends up with paralysis. Now, that is an accurate depiction of what Jake did to Promise Faith. That has a potential sentence of life imprisonment. Why was that not charged when they had the medical evidence demonstrating what the injuries were? I know she isn't completely paralysed. She can move her arms, but she is paralysed in the sense that she cannot walk.
Alive today, but she is permanently bedridden. She has permanent damage, cerebral palsy, that is a result of long-term child abuse. I want to read to you the injuries that were presented in court to this judge at the time of that previous prosecution. Acute fracture of the posterior left rib, fifth rib, healing fractures of the
Posterior is back, so the ribs at the back as opposed to the ones in your chest.
Posterior lateral 6th, 7th, and 10th through 12th ribs, healing fractures of the 6th and 9th through 12th ribs, partial bone fracture of the skull, brain hemorrhage, significant prevertebral soft tissue swelling of the neck, and a healing tibia fracture of the right leg. This is severe abuse for an infant. And so whatever you think of the criminal justice system and people need a break, someone who does that to a child belongs in prison, period. Next question.
I agree.
Not to my knowledge, no. Yes.
Now, I think this is where the questions begin about the alleged confessions by Jake. So I apologise, I'm really struggling to hear the questions. The sound quality of what the mic picks up from the rest of the room is really difficult. They should really have a mic going round if they're doing these press conferences and having them streamed.
Emmanuel rder and said that is one of the signs of shaky baby syndrome. Do you believe that he has been responding to what you videos and does have the eye, I guess the eye for lack of a better word? Do you believe that he was shaken or
I'm not gonna. I can't speculate. What I'll say, I'll repeat what I already said. We believe that Emmanuel was severely abused over a period of time, and that that's the reason for the filing. The way it was is that he was abused over a period of time. Both parents would have been aware of that abuse. I've already called on you, so let me.
So you'll see they have included a period of time within the filing because the acts were not a one-off act of violence. It's a prolonged course of conduct.
I'm going to exhaust. Yes, sir. No, one question, sir.
So this is on the Tira, Ahmed, who has been covering the case greatly, and I'll talk a little bit about what happens in the next couple of minutes once we know what happens.
One question. I didn't say that, sir. I didn't say I know where the remains are.
So you'll recall that at the beginning, the DA says that they have a good idea, a good indication of where the remains may be. Ahmed has taken that as they know where the remains are. And he specifically asks, where are they? Now, you'll see that the DA treats him with a little bit of contempt compared to the other reporters in the room. And I think that that's unfair. He's been putting a lot of effort into covering this case. That being said, I can understand why the DA is very clear in the fact that they don't know exactly where Emmanuel is. And even if they did, they're not going to tell us. And the reason for that is this. Searching and helping to search and following up on tips is one thing. Although every tip that Ahmed receives should go immediately to law enforcement before he then follows up on it. And I'm not sure that has happened. But there is the world of difference between helping to search and hindering an investigation. And if you help to search by trampling all over the area that a tip says the remains may be, and picking up boxes and touching them with your ungloved hands, then there is a real risk that you will impact the evidence. You will contaminate that evidence. You will make it less evidence worthy. If you care about any case that you are covering and you are a boots on the ground type of creator, please bear that in mind. If you care about those cases, do not touch anything that might be evidence. You photograph it, you call it in, and you let the police come and handle it. You can stand there and wait for them to get there so that it's not impacted by somebody else in the meantime, absolutely. But do not go touching it. And certainly don't, and this isn't Ahmed, this was somebody else, do not go trampling around the home of a Red Room victim that is an actual crime scene. because all you are going to do is potentially impact on the veracity of that evidence, and that is not fair. These victims demand justice. They deserve justice. And the only way they'll get it is if we all stay in our lane. We're creators, we're content creators. Investigators are investigators. They are specially trained. They know how to ensure that the evidence and its veracity are maintained, okay? So let's all stick to our lane. We're not investigators. And that's me talking from an evidential background as a lawyer. Please be careful. The last thing you want to do as a content creator is to mess up a trial that happens later down the line.
Well, you should get some rest, sir.
So Ahmed basically says, if you know something about where baby Emmanuel is, you need to tell us so that I can get some rest. Which I can understand his point of view in that. But equally, law enforcement don't need to tell us anything. They don't need to hold this press conference. The fact that they're telling us as much as they are is useful, and we shouldn't kind of scorn the fact that they're giving us some information. But they don't need to tell us anything. They could literally keep their mouth shut until the trial day. But his reaction to Ahmed is unfair, really, and Ahmed actually ends up being removed from the premises shortly after this, which I think is extremely unfair.
You should get some rest. But no, I can't share with you anything. Look, there are professionals that are looking for the remains of this child. If the public has any information, then we ask for their help. So we don't know exactly where the remains are. We have some ideas in terms of where we're going to look and where we're going to continue to investigate. Yes, sir, all the way in the back.
I do think the DA is being a little bit deceptive there. I think he knows a fair deal more than he's letting on, and I think they probably do have a good idea where Emmanuel's remains may be, having followed the amount of evidence that they have. But I don't think necessarily that they should tell the public where that is, because I do think that there is a real risk that that area would be tampered with.
No, I'm not going to do that. That's unfortunately, I understand it's an obvious question, but I just can't go into it. Those are things that the evidence will be presented in court, and I'll have to wait till we do that. Who's next? Yes, sir.
Can you explain, I know they both have charges filed against them, but do you believe that Jake or Rebecca both were actively involved in abusing Emmanuel, or like, was she just complicit in what he was doing, or the other way around? Can you explain any more of that?
All I can explain is what we've filed. We filed murder charges on both of them and making a false police report on both of them. So you can extrapolate that we believe that both of them are guilty, that we can prove it's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt for both the murder and the filing of the false police report. You know, how it breaks down as to who did what, that also has to wait for the trial.
So that's quite significant information. What he's just said there is that they have evidence that both Jake and Rebecca have been actively involved in the abuse of baby Emmanuel. they both contributed to his unaliving by their actions. And they were both involved in creating and continuing with the false police report, which stands to reason.
So let me go this way. Okay.
Procurador, básicamente, si nos puede hablar exactamente de este caso de 2023 que dice usted comenzó en 2018 y pudiera ser el eslabón que hubiera evitado.
Now, some of the questions are in Spanish. Obviously, we're in an area here that is
Pues ya dije lo
large
que puedo decir.
portion
Fue una tragedia
Spanish speaking.
increíble y no hubiera sucedido. El juez hizo un gran error y juzgó mal y el sistema se quebró ese día. Jueces, fiscales, defensores, todos tenemos un deber y tenemos que hacer nuestro deber en nuestro trabajo. Todo lo que puedo decir.
Pero básicamente no debió de haberle dado la libertad bajo palabra.
Claro que no. Le dio libertad condicional y esto fue un caso de prisión. Cuando uno hace daño así a un niño, debería ir a prisión. Eso es lo que dice la ley. La ley dice que la sentencia debe ser prisión por crímenes de este nivel de gravedad. Y en este caso le dio probation. Okay.
I don't understand Spanish, so if anybody does want to put a comment in the comments below explaining what he just said, that would be really good.
Let me go to you. I haven't called on you yet.
There's been rumors that Emmanuel had been seen for days or even weeks prior to August 14th.
No, unfortunately, I can't. That has to wait for the trial to come out. Yes, sir.
Jim Davidson with King News Network. Given the history that Jake has been obviously charged with previous child abuse cases, has CPS been involved with Emmanuel throughout his life at all, or have they ever checked up on parents?
To my knowledge, CPS has not been involved with Emmanuel. I don't believe there was any CPS involvement in this current case.
Which is blindsiding. I've talked about this before. Before Emmanuel was even born, if he was named as the father anywhere, or if Rebecca Haro mentioned him, it should have shown up on their records in the health service that he had this prior conviction. More importantly, I cannot imagine any defendant being on probation for any length of time, not mentioning a new partner and 2 new children. Oh, something about, Rebecca, who's Rebecca? Oh, that's my new girlfriend. She's going to an antenatal appointment. That should have been enough. Probation should have been straight onto CPS and health saying, are you aware of this individual's history? Because if that had have happened and there was proper communication between the different organisations, this could have been prevented.
Let me go. I've already called on you. So have I called on you already? No, go ahead, please. I can tell you that that's not true. It's there's no confession made in jail. I'll go back there and then I'll come back to you, Rob. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so we have it there from the horse's mouth. There was no confession made in jail. Now, does he mean there was no Perkins operation in jail? I suppose one has to ask the question, what does he count as a confession? Again, I wonder how a former prosecutor from that area has got inside sources that tell her that if it's not accurate. That being said, these things can happen. Maybe they thought about it, didn't carry it out. Maybe whatever he told them, they've already disproved, and so it isn't a confession. Who knows? But that's the official position is that there was not a confession in jail.
Can you tell us how many kids Jake and Rebecca had were, you know, time of the arrest? We know 2-year-old was taken. We saw
Yeah.
How many kids did they have?
Well, there's the 2-year-old and then baby Emmanuel. Yeah. Going back.
So I think that's just looking at which children they had care of. There's only those 2 children in their care specifically. The other children of the family are in the care of other people already, it sounds like.
There, yes, ma'am. Yeah. You know, a nobody homicide is always difficult, but obviously with an infant, we know that baby Emmanuel didn't, you know, leave on his own or is not, you know, didn't leave town. Obviously, it's a little different when you're talking about an infant, but we have a lot of experience in this county trying no body homicides, and we're confident that we can gain convictions in this case. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us more about the search on Sunday? What led to that field and why that area?
Well, I think Sheriff Dyke has already explained that. He answered that question by saying there's been a level of cooperation with the defendants. So that's why they went to that area. But beyond that, that's all I can say.
It's interesting to me that they don't want to tell us what the conversation was that led them to that area, even though it's now been discounted as an area where Emmanuel is. It'll be interesting to see when the trial happens what comes out about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think the obvious question is, what happened then? I mean, you did hear the report, my coworker was asked about the jail confession, authorities used fake inmates to get information, and the father confessed that.
Well, see, that's not true. So I don't know where you, well, no. See, this is what happens when you've got all these folks out there online and these keyboard warriors. You get a lot of misinformation, and what you just said is not true. It's misinformation. So that's what I'll tell you did not happen. Okay. I can't talk about the facts of the case. Well, no, I'm giving you information about baby Emmanuel. I'm giving you information about the cases and the investigation, but what you just said did not happen. And so, that's not, I can't be responsible for when you guys get it wrong. Go ahead.
I know you're not found the remains, but based on the level of cooperation the suspects are, is a strong likelihood that remains were at least at one point into that land in general.
Yeah, I'm just not going to comment on that. We're looking for the remains. These investigation is continuing. We're hoping to find the remains of baby Emmanuel. Yeah, please, Sheriff.
This is to that and to the question before. The problem that we are having in this, basically even on the question that was asked 2 questions ago, is someone posts something on social media and then you all believe that it's true. I actually complimented the mainstream media because you've actually been reaching out to us for comment and actually been printing what we've told you. It hasn't been the sensationalism and the wants for clicks for social media. And that is doing nothing but harming this investigation. And when you form your opinion and come in here and ask questions like that, you're not serving the public in any way. The question way earlier, get some rest. There should be no one out there looking for baby Emmanuel except for us, because all you're going to do is complicate things in the future. And the one thing that I emphasize that I want to make it clear here, the reason this is happening relatively quickly and the reason why we got such a handle on this fast is I believe that the Inland Empire is served better by their 2 sheriff's offices than any place in the state. And this particular case doubled its efforts. So instead of having 4,500 people looking for baby Emmanuel, you had 9,000. And so how did we get all of this information? It's called investigation. And we have 2 entire departments doing nothing but sifting through evidence, searching for evidence, trying to figure out what happened, who was responsible, and how we're going to successfully prosecute it. And misinformation, lies, and purposeful misdirection is going to do nothing but harm this investigation. And I am begging all of you with cameras out here, don't be a part of it.
Okay.
Okay, and to some extent, I can entirely agree with what he's just said. So certainly it should be them that's looking. And certainly only them that's touching any potential evidence. can we, as the public, on a platform, speculate and discuss potential theories? Absolutely. I think the difficulty comes is when people believe that it is an absolute fact when it isn't, and it then gets spread like wildfire as an actual fact. And I've made it very clear all the way through this video that the authorities do not accept that anything that Brian Ensign has said is accurate. He has now doubled down and said his sources are valid sources that he trusts. So I think we have to go off the official position at this time. So the factual official position is that Jake Haro has made no level of confession. And they haven't found baby Emmanuel. They are still looking, but they have some information which leads them to believe that they may know where he can be located, but that they don't know exactly where he is. Obviously, if they knew exactly where he was, they'd have been and got him already, let's face it. Let them do their investigation. Let's follow what they say. I will bring you every update I can that is factual. I'll discuss the speculation that goes around and talk about whether or not that seems like it might be something that can be meted out. But in terms of actually understanding the position, we need to stick to what the authorities are describing, certainly to a large degree, especially when they're that voracious about the view that I've told you and I've told you already that did not happen. It simply didn't happen. Well, you know, why would he say that if it had happened? It seems quite bizarre, unless, of course, there's a reason they need to protect this Perkins operation. Maybe it's still ongoing, whatever, I don't know. The press conference continues. I don't think there's anything massively probative after this that is said. So if you want to watch the rest of it, then the footage is very easy to find. But that's where I'm going to leave it in terms of my analysis of the current position. I think that the DA and the officers said some interesting things that give us a little bit more insight than they possibly intended to provide. For me, the key takeaway is they know and have evidence to prove that both Jake and Rebecca were involved in the acts against Emmanuel over a period of time that ultimately cost him his life. And they were deliberate acts. And that tells me a lot, unfortunately, about how this little boy was living. And I don't for 1 minute believe that it was only Emmanuel. So I hope, beyond all hope, that the little girl who was in their care has been checked over very thoroughly and has not only had an examination by a medical expert, but also has had what's called a skeletal survey, which is a full x-ray of their entire body from different angles And that shows if there are any healing fractures. And they sometimes, dependent on what the x-rays show, if there are any areas of question, we'll also do kind of MRI or CT scans of different areas as well. That is an important piece in terms of their actions overall, because there may very well be charges later on if anything is found in relation to that older daughter. But in terms of Jake, I really pray that they find him, because I think that his remains